Hello! In today's video, I'll be going over how I illustrate characters from the sketching to the inking and then finally the painting process. So let's jump right into it. So I'm really excited to film this video because this is something I love to do. I love illustrating different characters. The first step I do is sketch the basic character. I like to think of it as mapping out the different shapes on the page, right? So I always like to look at the larger shapes first. Then once I have those large shapes, I like to kind of divide them into smaller shapes and then add details. But for my initial sketch, I like to keep it really rough. And so the lines don't always look refined. They may look messy. The proportions may be off, but at this stage, it is okay. So once I have like a rough sketch, then I examine the lines. There'll be some lines that I like, some lines that I don't like. So the lines that I do like, I like to go over them multiple times and darken up those lines. And I always, initially, I don't add any details. So the reason I do this is so that if I had to make any like major change in the sketch, I can just quickly erase those rough lines and then redraw it. Versus if I were to add all those details in the beginning and then the proportion is off, then I have to erase all those details and I just lose all that work. So I avoid adding too much details in the beginning. But do I follow this all the time? No. Sometimes I am this stubborn and I just right away add details, which can, be not good. I mean, in some of my previous videos, that has happened to me, where it's like I just start drawing, adding all these details, and then a portion of the character is I don't have space to draw the portion of the character, and it's just outside the page. So learn from my mistakes. And yeah. And then I have this habit of whenever I'm sketching to keep going over the lines with my pencil and keep darkening it up. So I have these sketching pencils I sketch with, but after I sketch with those pencils, sometimes I even go back with a mechanical pencil to really sharpen those lines because, the sketching pencils, they become dull, especially for me, one thing I suck at is sharpening pencils and keeping them sharp to a point. For whatever reason, my pencils keep breaking whenever I sharpen them. And so, yeah, then after I sketch with the pencil, what I do is I grab my mechanical pencil and just refine those lines so they're nice and crisp and sharp. I love the taper lines. So when the lines are close to the end, I like to taper them. That is my favorite thing in the world. And then out of all the elements, whenever I'm sketching, I like to focus on the face the most because that, for me, especially when drawing characters, is the main focus. That's where you capture the expression, and with the face, you can really create a story in your drawing, right? If they're happy, they're sad, they're angry, or what have you. Their facial expression, I think, really just says it all, right? So I like to spend the most time on it. Even if I have limited time for a specific drawing, I always slow down on the face. And yeah. And so here I'm sketching the hair of this character. Initially, I was thinking of having the face turn one way. I think it was turned to the right or the left, I don't remember. But then I ended up changing it up. And that's what's really great of having a super rough and unrefined sketch in the beginning with less details, is that if you want to change it, you can change it really easily. And then you also see the mistakes or the issues of that drawing earlier on when you have a little thumbnail or little tiny minuscule sketch. You can see oh, this doesn't look right. Let me fix it now before I add any more details to this drawing and it becomes too late. So yeah, you can just see me change things in my sketches all the time. Here I'm just sketching out the hair. I honestly had no plan on what kind of hairstyle I wanted. I was thinking, should it be straight? But then all the other sketches had straight hair. So I'm okay, maybe I should do wavy and change it up a little bit. And then just, yeah. And then I was like, oh, should I do short hair, long hair? So I think I did like medium hair or something. For every element of the sketchbook spread, I like to have each element unique. So like if I've already drawn like short hair on one of the characters, I'll just draw like a little bit longer hair on some of the other characters just to mix it up and to have some interest to the spread. Now I believe I'm in the inking stage. So what I think is like the best practice whenever you're inking is to erase the lines, right? And so if you're like me, I always like drawing my pencil marks really dark. Wow, cannot speak. Dark lines. Yeah, I like to draw really dark lines. So the issue with doing this when you're inking is that it's kind of hard to see where the pencil mark ends and where the ink begins because the pencil mark is so dark, especially if you're using like the 2B or 4B pencil. So I like to sometimes, when I'm in the mood, go back and erase some of those pencil marks with a kneaded eraser, so that the pencil sketch is lighter, and then when you're inking it, you can really see where the ink is and which parts you have inked, which parts you have not inked so far. And that's what happened to me in the past, you know, like the pencil marks are so dark, I don't know which parts I've inked or not. And it's really funny because there are parts of the drawing I just forget to ink, and I'm just like, oh, wait a second, where did that character's hat go? Or where did their hand go? And I think with this drawing, what happened was that the back leg, I think I forgot to ink it or something. I don't know, but like it was not until like towards the end of my drawing process where I was like, wait a second, the leg of this character, where's the back leg? And so I had to like draw it later down. But yeah, do not make the same mistakes like I do. But yeah, and then for the inking, I like, as I talked about before, like tapering the lines. So I like to go over the fine liners again and again, and try to vary the width of that line. But I only have one fine liner, so that's why with this one fine liner, I kind of pick and choose where I want the lines to become wider, and then in those areas, I kind of draw multiple lines and get it again, so it can like make that line wider. I don't know if I made any sense or not, but basically, I like to thicken up the lines that are on the outside of the drawing to make the drawing stand out. And then there's some specific elements like on the waves of the hair, especially when the hair like curls in. I also like to add some line width to that as well. And then for like the tinier details, like maybe the necklace or like the zipper or the seams of the clothing, I like to keep that as a very thin line, so it won't like overpower the drawing, right? Like I feel like if I drew everything with really dark lines, that could just be overpowering and like a detail overload. So yeah, I don't know if I really got the hang of this or not, but I really want to try to figure out how I can balance those lines, right? Have some nice thin lines, have some thick lines. Yeah, still trying to learn how to figure that out. But here I noticed that I've really zoomed in to this drawing. I don't even know why, but my hand is literally taking up half the screen. I think that's just so funny. But yeah, I'm just inking this character. I added like this little butterfly. Actually, it's a pretty big butterfly. It's taking up her entire shoulder. But yeah, I added like a butterfly here for all the elements on the sketchbook spread. I tried to add like some element of nature. So this one has a butterfly. The other character on the right has like a what do you call it? Like a leaf halo or like a leaf headband wrapping around her head. And then some of the other characters, they're like holding a chicken. Just something really fun. I don't know. Honestly, it really just started with that character holding the chicken, and I'm like, yeah, all of the rest of the characters in the spread are going to have some nature related element to it. I like doing that in my sketchbooks. But yeah, ooh, I'm starting the painting process. That's fun. Hello, talking about the painting process. So what I use to paint all of the characters is acrylics. Not particularly because I have any like preference to acrylics or anything. It's just more so because I have these lying around and I don't know what to do with them. So I've literally just been using them. So yeah, but I think I've talked about it in my channel about how exactly I use acrylics in my entire in-depth process. So if you want to hear that about me talking on and on about acrylics, you can probably find a video on that on my channel. But the main gist of it is I always like to think of the drawings as different shapes, right? So when I'm painting it, what I like to do is I like to start at the middle of the shape with my paintbrush and then spread out the paint towards the edges. That way the paint doesn't go over any of the lines. And I also like to use like minimum amount of paint on my brush. I don't like to overload my paintbrush with paint. Now, do I always do a good job of this? No. Like sometimes I'm just painting so fast that I'm like, whatever, I'm just going to use a lot of paint. And that always bites me in the end because I add too much paint and it goes over the lines. But honestly, because I'm using pastel paints, if it goes over the lines, it's not a big deal because the lines do end up showing through the paint. Even though acrylic paints are supposed to be opaque, because I'm using like all these pastel colors, they're pretty light, so it's fine. And that's also part of the reason why I use really bold lines. It's also because I like the style, but also more so that if I go over the lines, I'll be fine. Yeah. And then what else? I'm trying to think what else I'll do with these acrylics. I always like to use one color at a time just because I'm very lazy in washing the paintbrushes in between color switches. So like in the beginning, I was just focusing on the skin color, getting that down, painted all of the characters' skin tones first, and then go and paint the clothing, the hair or whatnot, you know? And then I always like to start from left to right whenever I'm painting because I'm right-handed. So as it's drying on the left side, I can move towards the right. And so then once everything dries, then I can go back to the left page and paint again so that I don't smudge any of the paint with, my hands getting in the way. But honestly, throughout the entire process, I got paint all over my fingers, all over my hands, everywhere. It is always a mess. Well, I like to say it's a delightful mess because painting is fun, but it's also like, oh no, I don't want to get it all over the table, my computer, my camera, or whatnot. So it's definitely a process for sure. Yeah. And then for choosing colors, I honestly don't even have that much of a process for this. Oh, and so I want to pause on that for a second before I talk about that. Here, when I'm painting the orange, you can see the amount of paint I've loaded onto the paintbrush, and it is literally like bulging up on the paper. So with like acrylics, like if you don't smoothen out the acrylics, it will literally have like bumps and like rough edges to it, and you can actually see like the 3D effect of the paint. So I always like going back and like kind of smoothing out the paint if I put too much over it, but for this one I was just like literally speeding through it, so I did not do that. But that's kind of fun to see that. My little mistakes, my little mess ups. But anyways, what I was talking about earlier was color palettes, right? Honestly, I don't have a good process for picking out colors. I just choose whatever colors that I want at that moment. And then I just pick like 5 or 6 colors because that's how much space I have on my palette. And then I just pick different colors for each character. I don't really think much about it. The entire point for me, I cannot speak. The entire point of art for me is just having fun. So that's what I like to do. Just color. Oh, and then here I am filling it in with a brush pen, this black color, to add a little bit of a pop. But yeah, I think that is my finished illustration. Thank you all so much for watching.